PodCastle, episode 723 for Tuesday the 22nd of February 2022. Just One Last Mango by Chaitanya Murali, read by Prashanth Srivatsa and rated PG-13. Good morning, good day, good afternoon and good evening, and welcome to PodCastle, a flying castle of fantasy fiction. I'm your host, Matt Dovey, and I'm delighted to present for your excitement and enjoyment Just One Last Mango by Chaitanya Murali, narrated by Prashanth Srivatsa. This episode is rated PG-13 and is a PodCastle original, and not only that, it's a professional debut for the author. So on behalf of everyone in the castle, congratulations, Chaitanya, on this auspicious day. May it be everything you dreamed of. Before we get into the story, I want to take a moment to share something cool with you. Statistics! Yes, numbers are cool, okay. We're all nerds here, don't pretend you're not excited. The big boss is in the sky, which is to say Reading, just north of London, ran the numbers for 2021. And over the year as a whole, you marvellous people downloaded our episodes over 500,000 times. We're averaging 51,000 downloads a month, which means there's a 5-figure sized crowd of you here every week. And this new host gig just got a lot more terrifying. Some rough math shows that somewhere between 4 to 7% of our audience as a whole, that is, across the whole Escape Artist family, donates via Patreon, Ko-fi, PayPal, Twitch or some other way, which is actually rising. Given everything we've all been through these last 2 years, to see those numbers in particular going up is an amazing vote of confidence in the work we're doing. So thank you. Your author today is Chaitanya Murali, a writer and editor based in Bengaluru, India. He has spent the past decade moving from one profession to the next, cycling from law to publishing, and now to game design, where he will remain. Your narrator is Prashanth Srivatsa, a speculative fiction writer also from Bengaluru, India. His works of short fiction have appeared in such notable magazines as Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Reckoning, Three-Lobe Burning Eye and Dark Matter, among others. He is represented by Naomi Davis, Bookends Literary Agency. And now pay attention, for our tale is about to begin. You'll fall into trouble if you don't heed the warnings.
Just One Last Mango by Chaitanya Murali, read by Prashanth Srivatsa. Do you want one? Meghna asked between bites. She was sitting in the upper branches of Balumama's mango tree with half a dozen golden fruits bundled in her podavai and another one in her mouth. I shook my head, keeping an eye out for Mama and an ear out for his dogs. If he caught us, then that was another day of helping him, another day of hearing him lecture us about how those mangoes were for selling, not eating, another day of unpaid labor, another loss for us. The mangoes I could eat once we were home. For now, I just wanted Meghna to get down so we could go. But my sister, older by a year and therefore infinitely more wise, swayed on the branch, kicking her legs and laughing, giddy from the flavor. Stolen mangoes always did taste sweeter. He's going to come out soon. My words were a hissed whisper. You better start running then, Meghna said, without the slightest urgency to accompany it. If anything, she seemed ready to fall asleep on the branch, splaying herself across it like a basking cat. Meghna, what if someone sees you? Their problem, no? It's fine, Karthik. No one comes here at this time anyway. And besides, he never eats them. I could hear the dogs stirring now, and my bones screamed in the panicked remembrance of 1,000 crushing dog hugs. Balumama's dogs weren't the biting kind, they were the aggressively friendly kind, which was somehow worse. They threw themselves at us with abandon, looking only to knock us down and pin us long enough to lick our faces raw. They are coming. Toss the mangoes to me, I said, opening Tata's veshti that I'd snuck into his room to take while he snored on his wicker cot, a Dinatandi magazine spilled open over his chest. 4 fruits dropped, golden splashes in billowing cotton, gilded and shining in the morning sun. These weren't normal mangoes. I looked up, searching for where Meghna could have plucked these, but I couldn't tell. The culprit herself was scurrying down the tree, each scraping step belying her grand indifference from before. She had the other mangoes tied in a bundle in her podawai, though I couldn't tell if those were normal or not. What are these? I asked, holding one up for her to inspect. Saw them just before I came down. They were in the upper boughs, coming from another tree, she replied. Don't they look fancy? Just imagine how they'll taste. Did they come over from the compound wall? I asked. She ignored the question. Her silence was enough to tell me the answer. We jumped the compound wall as the dogs turned around the corner. Balumama close behind them. He was pale as a ghost, his skin and hair bleached white by some strange disease that had afflicted him for many years. But despite that, despite his age, he was still sturdy. He told us he'd been a warrior in his youth, though he never told us any stories about it. But for now, we were over, and so we were safe. Meghna and I stood in the road, secure with the barrier protecting us. We had an unspoken rule in this game, Balumama and us. If we made it over the compound wall, then we'd won for the day, and we were free to keep our spoils. If not, we'd work as punishment. Cutting it fine, eh, kids? Balumama said, grinning. I was this close to getting you today. He pinched his fingers close and then leaned his elbows against the wall. I wanted to leave long ago, but Meghna refused, I said. It's more fun this way, Karthik, but you won't get it since you're such a Bayandanguli. Hey, your brother's not a coward. He's just cautious. Without him pushing you, I'd catch you every time, Balumama said. And without me, he'd come home with one mango every day and be happy with it, Meghna replied. I stuck my tongue out at her. Balumama laughed. You won for today, kids. But remember, you owe me my cut still. I'll expect it at lunch tomorrow. Now go home before your mother scolds you again. He waved his goodbye and returned to his house, the dogs whining at his heels. Should we have shown him the strange ones? I asked Meghna. Why would we? He'd take them from us and sell them. I don't want to let them go to waste like that, she said, disgusted at the idea. I followed her home then, but each glance I stole at the golden mangoes twisted the knot in my stomach ever tighter. There was one house in the village we didn't enter. It loomed over us all, a remnant of a time long since lost. It had once belonged to kings, Amma said, a summer home for them to stay in when they wanted to get away from their stuffy palaces, when they wanted to live amongst their subjects as one of them. But at some point, the place was forgotten, left to be a relic and a reminder of better times. Most families had shifted their homes ever further away from it, but Balumama wasn't given to our superstitions. His home was ancestral property, as old as the one we didn't enter, and there was no way he was leaving it. But even he kept his distance from the house, marking the base of the wall along its borders with wooden spikes, though nothing lived on the other side. He was old enough to know why the house was abandoned, and though he wouldn't give voice to the thoughts, he had seen things there I knew. But that was why Amma didn't like us helping the old man and why Meghna loved it. She would constantly sit in the boughs of Mama's trees and peer over the large compound wall, trying to get a good look at what was so terrible about an old summer home. What could be so terrifying about it that they had to build a 15-foot wall all around it? I don't know how she found the tree or how that branch snaked its way over the wall to her, but they were a match made in heaven. Insatiable curiosity, meeting that which longed for contact. No branches have ever come over the wall before, I told her, while we sat out on the veranda of her house. You just haven't seen them, she replied. Why aren't you worried? That building is cursed, and Amma is going to kill you if she finds out. She's not going to find out because you're going to help me finish these mangoes before she comes. I am not touching the cold ones. Give me the kilimuku. Bahindangoli. Common sense, it's called. You should learn it someday. She made a face at me and took a bite out of the mango, skin and all. Meghna didn't care for the time it took to cut a mango into serviceable pieces, preferring to eat them like apples. She also did it because she knew I found it weird. She squealed, a drunken grin playing itself across her juice stained cheeks. This is heaven, she declared. Should have taken the offer, Karthik. Now I'm definitely not sharing these with you. Whatever, they're probably not that good anyway. I turned away from her, letting my legs tangle off the porch, but my eyes betrayed me, edging over to the corners of their prisons, constantly straining to get another glimpse of the mangoes Meghna ate. I waited for something to happen to her. Maybe a tree would grow out of her stomach, like Amma always warned, or she'd transform into a monster, like in Amma's stories. But to my disappointment, nothing happened to her. She spent the day buzzing around, thrilled at her theft, and utterly insufferable. I was miserable. It was just a tree. I didn't want something to happen to her, but I was disappointed that the first thing we'd seen from the house had been so normal. Other than their color, the mangoes had just been fruit. No magic, no curse, nothing. Amma came home late, having spent the whole day helping Kannamma Aya's cow give birth. She was too tired today to even be disappointed with us for disappearing before she could take us with her. We heated water for her bath, and then she collapsed onto the rajai on the floor. That night, I dreamed of solid gold mangoes. I walked in an ancient courtyard, oversaw the birth of a union, and the celebrations that ensued. I saw kings dressed in silk veshtis and angavastrams, their fingers intertwined as their mothers took stage. And I saw another, a six-armed woman woven from shadow, watching them. Meghna woke me sometime after midnight, throwing Amma's hand off me and pulling me to my feet. She didn't need to say it. I could feel it in her trembling grip. She had seen something too. We snuck back into Balumama's garden. Even with his dogs patrolling the grounds, there was no real danger here. Nothing could wake Mama once he fell asleep. We played with the dogs for a few minutes, calming them just in case someone was about this side of the village, and then climbed back into the tree. I went up first this time, driven by curiosity and a determination not to let Meghna get them all again. At the very top, where I could just about peek over the wall, I saw the golden fruits. They glinted even in the dark of night, the burnished gold seemingly possessing a light of its own. Meghna must have been lying in the morning because that tree didn't reach over the wall. It was nestled a full 10 feet within the old ruins. She must have climbed over when I wasn't looking and collected the mangoes. I looked for a branch that could carry her over the wall and spotted one not far from me. The vines growing on the other side would be easy to climb down, and I could return with an armful of the mangoes in moments. Easy as that. And then she'd never call me a Bindanguli again. Karthik, what are you doing? Meghna asked, confusion and concern rising in her tone. The same thing you did in the morning, climbing over to get those fruits. I told you I didn't go over. There was a branch right. Her voice trailed off, and a raised finger pointed at empty blackness. Yeah, can't lie now that I'm looking, no? I said. Karthik, I am not lying. It was right there. I didn't go over the wall. No one goes over, you know that. She sounded afraid now, but I didn't believe her. How could she be telling the truth when I could see the tree with my own eyes? There was no way she hadn't set foot inside the old grounds. I inched closer to the wall, my eyes focused on the prize, my mouth watering at the promise of its taste. I heard Meghna climbing now, calling out to me, but her voice was distant, whispered. I could ignore her. I reached the wall, climbed over. Meghna's voice was gone now. Instead, I heard the silence of ages, the whispers of ancient winds whistling through halls as old as time. I could tell now that the house was overtaken by plants, ivy and ficus and money plant consuming wood and stone, wrapping them in winding tendrils until only yawning holes remained to indicate the existence of a homestead. And just in front of the veranda stood the mango tree. I saw again for a moment the kings kneeling before it, venerating it as a gift of their god. And then they were gone. I went first to the house. No spectral faces peered out at me from those decaying halls, no ghostly whispers inviting me in with temptations of power. All those warnings, all those tales about the house, and there was nothing here. What was everyone so afraid of? I turned then to the tree, turned my gaze from the house to the golden fruit, that which I had come for. I stepped over the dried husks of birds and squirrels, barely noticing them. I told myself that those were it eyes I saw carved deep into the tree trunk, that I was reaching my prize. I would not step closer if I were you. The man's voice was that of the wind, timeless and thin, susurrations in my head. I stopped in my tracks, paralyzed by sudden confirmation that all the tales had been true after all. I looked at the mango tree, which was only a dozen feet from me now, seeing clearly the grinning visage of the devil cut into it. Its branches waved at me, beckoning me closer to that maw of jagged timber. Inside, I saw a writhing mass, centipedes, spiders, scorpions. They tumbled and jostled within for position, for first claim at this latest feast. I stepped back, heel crunching on an old corpse. He likes to spit the dried corpses out each time. See how far he can toss them, the man said. I swiveled instinctively, looking for the ghost, for this creature toying with me. What do you want? I ventured, puffing out my chest even as I cowered. You're the first person I've seen in years since my neighbor shut me out. I don't want old Banganapalli to eat you. Before I even say hi, he stepped out of the house's entrance where the vines and the shadows met in a tangle of impenetrable darkness at the doorway. He wore a veshti seemingly cut from those selfsame shadows, a sheet of swirling black wrapped around his legs. It gave the impression, when he stood still, of a statue carved from a tree, possessing only an upper body. Step away from my brother, demon, Meghna yelled. The strange man cocked his head, and I turned to find my sister standing atop the wall, wooden bat in hand, a warrior draped in red, come to rescue me from peril. Karthik, wait right there. I am. What on earth is that? She was staring at the tree, whose branches now split in half to wave invitingly at both of us. Girl, meet Banganapalli. Banganapalli, don't eat, girl, the ghostly man said. Meghna climbed down gingerly, keeping a distance from the tree. When she reached me, she grabbed my hand and pulled me back towards the wall, her eyes flitting between the spectre and the tree. Leaving so soon? The man asked. He was still smiling, still a picture of calm. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed. Who are you? I asked. Karthik, do talk to it, Meghna hissed. That's a rude thing to say to the person who saved your brother. What are you, demon? Why did you call us here? The man demon ran a hand through thick shadows where there should have been hair. I am the owner of this land you're trespassing on, the one who planted the tree that sends you visions. You can call me Dhanush. His tone was teasing, a thin smile playing on his lips. He walked as he spoke, drawing closer to us, casual and rhythmic and mesmerizing. Meghna raised the bat, but we both knew it would do little to the thing we faced. You were the target, you know. I watched old Panganapalli try to reel you in with his mangoes in the morning, but you were too quick. So he searched for those who had touched his fruit, his lure, drew them in with visions, promises of answers, he said, shrugging. And if it wasn't for me, your brother would have followed those visions right into old Banganapalli's mouth. What do you want from us? Meghna asked. You saved him, so now he's in your debt? Tanush's grin grew wider, and then he was in front of us, a hand on each of our heads. You're absolutely right, he said, the darkness flowing from his head and his veshti to cover us, muffle our screams, swallow us whole. I woke up in a cellar, my face pressed against ice cold rock. Water dripped from somewhere to echo its despondent pitters through the cavern. Around me, I could see the vague outlines of enormous roots running all along the walls and the ground before disappearing into cracks in the rock. I was under the tree. I stifled my cry. What had I done? Karthik, are you there? Meghna's whisper came from across the cellar, quiet but urgent. She'll know what to do. When I reached her, she grasped my arms and pulled me into a quick hug. Momentary warmth. Then she was holding me at arm's length. If you'd wanted one so badly, I'd have given it to you in the afternoon, you idiot, she said. My laugh was choked, cutting off midway to become a gurgle of tears that I hid in her shoulder. It's okay. We're still here. I'll get us out. Just wait and see. I rubbed my face and nodded. But it wasn't just that. I saw something. After whatever the demon did, I said. Meghna's breath caught in her throat. What did he show you? She asked. Two men planting a seed in the ground. I think one of them was him, I replied. He showed me the same thing. Why is he doing this? Meghna asked. Maybe he's doing the same thing the tree did, toying with us, I said. Whatever his game is, we are not falling for it. Now, which way is out? Meghna asked, walking forward, right hand pressed to a moldy wall, and left hand gripping one of mine like a vise. The cellar eventually gave way to a wide corridor that reeked of decay. More roots coursed the passage, spreading across the framework of this house like veins under the skin. The passage never split, and soon enough I could feel the dying breath of the midnight wind brush at my face. The surface was close. The roots faded as we rushed for the exit, trickling further into nothingness with each step we took. We reached the rotted door to this cellar, broke through the threshold, and interrupted a feast. The cellar had held the damp chill of a midwinter night, but what we entered now was summer at the brain. Servants in sweat stained vesties walked past us, ignoring us as they carried trays of lavishly dressed kale and deer to the people sitting cross legged on the floor of the house's inner courtyard. Stone and mud cups clattered into one another in celebrations, the muggy air doing nothing to curb the enthusiasm of those in the room. At the head of the feast, the same two men I had seen planting the tree in my dream sat side by side, splitting the revelers into lines running parallel down from each of them. They were bare chested, with hair tied into kudumis above their heads. While those around ate and drank, these two men had eyes only for one another, as if nothing existed but them. This was supposed to be a good day. The demon Dhanush stood beside us, still ghostly and unnatural, even in the light of this vision's fires. Of all those in the palace courtyard, only his gaze seemed to touch us, but his words were soft, carrying little of the malevolent humor they'd had before. I saw this. The tree showed me these people, I said. That's you in the center, isn't it? Meghna asked. This is a vision from before my house fell, Dhanush said. His ancient gaze was fixed on the scene playing out before us, where the king's mothers rose to take their positions behind their sons. The room stilled, cups paused mid drink, chokes died half uttered on drunk lips. Even the rasam, boiling at the hearth in the center of the floor, stopped simmering so as to not anger the matriarchs. The one closer to us spoke, raising a mug to the open sky. We give thanks today, first to Devi Jeshta for staying her hand on this auspicious day, and second to our hosts and now family, the Chorans. Long may the bonds we have built today live. She brought the cup to her lips and drained it smoothly, prompting everyone but the couple to do the same. Dhanush spoke, quiet bitterness drowning the scene before us. If only Jeshta had seen fit to leave us be. But I've come to know her much better in the years since, and know now how much she relished stringing us along like little idiot puppets. I knew of this goddess. The oldest villagers attributed ill fortune to her. I'd heard her name invoked when Amma was called to help with livestock that had fallen ill. But Dhanush spoke of her as someone they worshipped. Who would worship bad luck? The scene blurred into shadows, voices distorting into echoed wails as the spectre reformed its vision. We were back in the vision I had seen earlier of Dhanush and his husband planting what would become the cursed tree. Was it already a monster? Meghna asked. For now, it was what tied our families together, what tied Rajan and me together. What happened? The question came out a whisper. You asked if I wanted something from you, Dhanush said softly. We nodded. I have two demands to make of you. One, I think you know, so that will happen if you carry out the second demand. I just want you to witness it through to the end. He was rambling, his words vague and confusing. What's the second demand? Meghna asked. I'll show you. The mango tree had grown to adulthood now, rising high into the sky and broad as an elephant. In the broad daylight of this most recent vision, I could tell just how much the curse had affected our village. Mailampetai had been a city of thousands, its lands filled with all manner of people. From the courtyard of the house, I could see a marketplace that spanned the distance of the entire village today, where merchants dressed in outlandish garb screamed in strange tongues as they hawked their goods to busy passers by. What happened to this town? I asked. This town was our dream, Rajan's and mine. Mailampetai meant everything to us. After all, it was where we had found each other. We wanted nothing more than for this city to prosper, to better its fortunes, and for that we were ruined. A figure walked up the hill from the market alone, his ash marked body and orange veshti, naming him a wandering priest, someone who could not be turned from the threshold of a house. That can't be, Meghna said, and a moment later I saw it too. The priest, all these centuries ago, was Balumama. But he's not a priest, I said, as if that was the least believable part of his appearance. He is one of Rajan's uncles, a warrior who had turned to the saffron once our union was announced, once his purpose was erased. We never realized that peace affronted him, Dhanush said. Balumama walked up to the house where the human Dhanush and Rajan waited to receive him. Please, Ayya, come inside. It's an honor for you to visit us once more, Dhanush said. I do not need to come inside, Thambi. I am but passing through your town. But if it may please you, could I eat some of the wonderful mangoes on that tree? He asked. Balumama had shaved his head around the kudumi in the manner of priests. Please, nothing would make us happier than to see you eat from our bond plant. It has been far too long since you visited us, so why don't you stay for a few days? Rajan said. Thank you, my son. You are most gracious, Balumama said. It is nothing, especially for my family. Your time here shall be spent in the greatest comfort, Mama, Rajan replied, drawing Balumama into an embrace. That was Rajan. He would do anything to ensure that others were well taken care of, even if he had to force it upon them, the spectre said. Rajan rushed into the house and returned a few moments later bearing a cushion and a straw woven mat for the priest to sit on, placing them in the shade of the tree. Balu took his seat there and began to eat. The day turned to dusk, and dusk to night, but still the priest ate. He called for Rajan and Dhanush every hour or so, asking them to climb ever higher into the boughs for fruit. They did so without complaint, because who could ask a priest to stop? But the tree was growing barren, and the priest's hunger showed little sign of abating. Balumama patted his belly, dropping another kottai to join the burgeoning pile on the mat in front of him. Balumama patted his belly, dropping another kottai to join the burgeoning pile on the mat in front of him. Maybe just one last mango, and I'll be full, Thambi, he said, smiling beatifically at Rajan. As we watched, Rajan climbed into the upper reaches of the tree, searching blindly in the night for one last golden fruit to save them this priest's wrath. We stood next to both the human Dhanush and his miserable spectre, watching in open mouthed horror as Rajan's left foot missed a branch just as he found the last fruit in the tree. The spectre watched on, face stoic as stone, though the shadows of his hair and veshti flared with repressed anger. Rajan fell silently, shock stealing what time he had left. The human Dhanush did not reach him in time, only arriving once the blood pouring from Rajan's head had already begun to soak into the ground. And behind the tragic kings, Balu stood stoic, firm in his guest right. Where is my mango? He asked. Dhanush didn't reply, his head buried in Rajan's chest as he sobbed for his love. Boy, are you going to leave me unsatisfied? Balu asked again, his tone threatening now. Dhanush turned to him, his head heavy with tears. He looked from the priest to the seeds that littered the floor around him, a dangerous cast setting in his back and shoulders. You killed him, Dhanush said. What? You killed my husband, Dhanush screamed. The priest warrior rose to his full height, a full half foot taller than Dhanush. He towered over the king, grim, offended, and triumphant. How dare you accuse me of murder? First, you fail to feed me, and then you call me a murderer? There was a wicked glee lying just under Balu's veneer of apoplectic rage. He was enjoying this. Oh, Devi, hear my words. This false king has shamed and insulted me, your most ardent follower. O Devi, cast your net over him, grant him the boon of your divine misfortune, so that he may be an example for the world to see. Balu cried to the skies. What are you doing? Dhanush yelled, hovering protectively over Rajan's body. Devi, channel your power through this cursed tree. Bind these two ill mannered souls to it, the source of this insult on your flesh, their hubris, their greed, their ill conceived bond, all of it is tied to this tree, a most prescient gift to you. The moonlight focused on Dhanush, Rajan, and the tree, its glow illuminating the awful elation on Balu's face. And then the light expanded, drawing the priest into its fold, devouring them before they could utter a sound. There it remained for several days, pulsing with energy that spread into the earth around the hill. All around us, people emptied into the streets as misfortune manifested within their homes, cursing them with its touch. They abandoned the town, forming an exodus that spread the word of Mailampetai's fall to all who would listen. In the end, only the light remained, a beacon illuminating the meaningless ruin of a prosperous town, a testament to the fickle whims of the goddess it had chosen to worship. It poured down on the house, bleaching it of color and life. When the goddess's power finally abated, the returning sun revealed Dhanush and Balu lying unconscious on the floor, both looking as they did in the present. The tree too had changed, its trunk twisting into its current tortured form. Of Rajan's body there was no sign, not even the blood that had spilled onto the ground. What he didn't consider was that Jeshta would include him in the curse. Ever opportunistic was the lady of misfortune. Why ruin only two lives when a third was standing right there begging for a blessing? Dhanush said. Balu awoke first and panicked when he realized what had happened. He drew a knife he had kept at his back and tried to kill Dhanush, but the blade twisted out of his grip and fell to the ground. He tried to choke him, but nerveless fingers refused to close around the spectre's neck. She plays cruel tricks, does Jeshta. He wanted us ruined, so she tied his fate to mine. We were forced to live this unlife together, unable to kill each other. And my poor dear Rajan, who died for that fruit, he became my only hope. The tree, out of Balu's sight, blossomed a single golden mango. Now it made sense why Balu Mama always refused to eat the mangoes in his own garden. Meghna let go of my hand, which I'd forgotten she was still holding, and went to the tree. Its whip like branches waved slowly but didn't attack her. She spared a small glance for Balu, who was stumbling to his feet now, running from the sight of his crime. She reached into it and plucked the mango. It shone in her hands, a teardrop of sunlight. And then it was a regular mango, no different to any that we had seen before. Nothing like the ones that had lured me here in the first place. Dhanush smiled. You know what you must do, he said, disappearing into shadow. The vision broke, leaving us alone in the courtyards of a home ruined by envy. Meghna stood under the tree, but it did nothing to her. She pressed a hand to its trunk and then backed away. We climbed over the wall and returned home through Balumama's garden, the mango hidden deep in Meghna's podawai. Tomorrow we would see Balumama. We made it home, cut the mango open, and let it boil over a fire. I roasted chilies, vendayam, kottamalli, and ginger, while Meghna scraped the insides of a coconut. We ground the coconut and the talicha into a paste and threw them into the pot with the mango. Add some curd and manjal podi and stir until the mango flavor is subtle, a sweet accentuation under the spice of the more kurambu. Amma often made this using the mangoes we stole from Balu Mama, a recipe she had picked up through constant experimentation, a way to keep mangoes interesting once we'd had thousands of them. Balu Mama would be visited his house. I kept his dogs away from Meghna, who held two bowls, one of curd and one of rice, in her hands. Balumama was lying on a cot, as he usually was in the afternoon. He looked the same as he always had, pot bellied, white haired, and pink skinned from illness. Mama, our payment for yesterday, Meghna said. She held the dishes out for him to take. He grunted with the immense effort of sitting up and took the dishes from her, smelling them for what we now realized was a hint of mango and not finding it. We watched with rapt attention as he mixed the korambu and rice together, mashing them with his right hand until there remained not a single grain of rice unstained by the golden curry. We watched him eat, saw the realization hit him with the first mouthful, and we watched him continue eating, ravenous, unstoppable, greedy, until he had licked the bowl clean. Why? I asked. Even the dogs had gone silent. I had forgotten the taste, Balu Mama said. He stared into the bowl like he could conjure more of the food if he looked hard enough. You knew what it was, and you still ate it, I said. Only after the first bite, and by then it was already done. You did well to hide it from me, he said. Are you angry? Meghna asked. That you went over the wall? Yes, but for this, I am glad, he replied. His hair was beginning to fall from his head, fluttering to the floor in wisps of light. Glad? Meghna asked. Are you not going to tell us that he showed us a lie? Or even that you're sorry for what you did? Bah, they deserved it then, and they deserve it today. I am not glad for them. I am glad you tricked me into eating those mangoes once more. They truly were delightful, Balu said. He held the bowl out in one atrophied skeletal hand. But please, just one last mango? There was once a house atop the hill overlooking Mailampettai. It was a grand affair, a summer home for kings. And then it was a ruin, fit only to hold the spectre of a man grieving the death of his love. It was a relic of a bygone time, a mausoleum built by the power of a long forgotten goddess. And now it too was taken by time. We climbed over the wall once Balumama had fallen to dust, ready to report our success to Dhanush. We pretended not to know what we'd see. The mango tree, so menacing when we had first laid eyes on it, had wilted, its many branches falling limp to the floor as it sank. The face carved into its heart had opened, depositing a human body on the earth. Rajan, beautiful and serene in slumber, no trace of the violence of his death, and kneeling in front of that body, cradling it in his lap just as he had all those centuries ago, was Dhanush. He turned his head to the skies, voicing an unspoken curse to the goddess who had done this to him, and then they fell to mist. Dhanush, Rajan, the tree, and the house. We were left standing on an empty lot. When the mists lifted, something glinted on the ground. Just one last mango.
And welcome back. Sometimes it's upsetting how talented some people are. What a remarkable debut. It feels archetypal in its roles and its characters. Chaitanya will definitely be an author to keep up with, so you should probably follow him on Twitter as @ChaitanyaMurali to catch all the future stories that I've no doubt will follow. Chaitanya said this about Just One Last Mango. I wrote this story as a way to connect with my roots once more. Most of my writing over the past 2 years has been an exercise in that, wanting to connect with my Tamil roots again. So a lot of the scenes here are built off anecdotes I've heard from my parents and grandparents. It's a picture of their lives growing up. So, if anything, I'd say that this story's setting is a postcard, a memory shared by community and passed down through time. Memory and history hangs over this story like a morning mist. as does cultural history over all of us, I suppose. It might get burned off by the frenetic activity of the day, lost in the bustle of our daily lives, but it creeps back every night and soaks every surface around us. It always feels most apparent in the morning, too, walking through familiar streets in the fresh light of dawn. Something about that liminal hour makes time blur, too. It's something worth doing every now and then, making the effort to feel connected to where you live. It grounds you. We are not just ourselves, but also the sum of all history. We should listen when it talks to us. That was our show for this week. On behalf of everyone at PodCastle, your co-editors Shingai Njeri Kugunda and Eleanor R. Wood, your assistant editor Sophia Barker and audio engineer Peter Adrian Berefesh, forum moderator Ossicat, and our many wonderful first readers Tierney Bailey, Aidan Doyle, Amelia Harrington, Kai Hudson, Craig Jackson, Devon Martin, Julia Patt, Hamilton Perez, Sri Kripet Krishna Prasad, Zeev Wheaties and Caitlin Zavanovich, and myself, Matt Dovey. Thank you for letting us share another story with you. The legal bit. PodCastle is part of Escape Artists Incorporated, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can share it, and please do, but you cannot sell it and you cannot change it. If you want specifics, check creativecommons.org. Our music is by Shiva in Exile. Everything we do on PodCastle is 100% donor funded, and if you'd like to support what we and the rest of Escape Artists do, please join us on our Patreon at patreon.com/EAPodcasts. Prefer another method? There's details for supporting us via Twitch, Amazon Prime, Ko-fi and PayPal on escapeartist.net. We'll be back next Tuesday with another fantastic tale. In the meantime, you might care to check out our sister podcasts, Escape Pod for science fiction, Pseudopod for horror, and Cast of Wonders for YA speculative fiction. If your heart belongs to us, though, we'll see you next week. Be safe and be kind.